Hello, fellow griever. You have found the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast, and I am Melissa, your host. I am with you on this journey because my 21-year-old son, Alex, died by suicide on August 7th of 2016. Since launching this podcast in late 2020, I have followed my heart and expanded the Leftover Pieces to include books and an online community where I host Zoom support groups every week. It is there, in this community, that I lead other parents who have lost a child by suicide from survival toward hope and into healing. The website is also a resource hub, a connecting point for all survivors of suicide loss. You can find me, ways to connect with me, and links to everything that I'm doing in the community on my website, theleftoverpieces.com. Know that I'm always open to suggestions and feedback. And if you know someone that I should connect with to be on the podcast, please let me know that as well. So now, I invite you to join me for real conversations, candid talk on hard topics surrounding the loss of our loved ones by suicide. I talk to other loss survivors, mental health experts, advocates, and on alternate weeks, I offer shorter solo episodes where I go down the rabbit hole to discuss things that have been on my mind or possibly parts of my journey that I feel would be beneficial to share. Every week, we explore the questions that haunt us, seek the courage to uncover the healing tools within us, and offer the comfort of a community that we all need so very much. It's true that our hearts and lives have been shattered, but come along with me, and together, let's choose to find meaning and even happiness amid the leftover pieces before us. Welcome. Hello, guys, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 19 of the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast. I'm Melissa, your host. And yes, today we have another guest conversation. I actually have a returning guest today. Amy King and I sat down recently to have a follow-up conversation to the one we had almost 2 years ago. We spoke in early season 4. I should have the episode in front of me, but I don't. I think it was season 4, episode 3. I actually just found it in my notes. And that was August of 2022, you all, so almost 2 years later. So no surprise that we had a lot to talk about. In the world that we live in after suicide loss, the minutes and days and hours and years can either crawl by or fly by. So 2 years to me right now sounds like a good amount of time for her and I to have decided it was time to catch up. And I will take just a minute and pause and formally introduce Amy. The world knows her as A.S. King, author extraordinaire to young adults and some middle grade books. Amy has been heavily awarded, but I know the one that she cherishes the most is being the only author to ever twice receive the Michael L. Prince Award. So I want to be able to at least mention that, but I'll kind of stay away from the formal biography stuff. Amy's not much to that kind of stuff, just as I'm not either. So I totally get it. But I will introduce her as Gracie's mom. Amy and I became connected because of the mutual loss of children to suicide. Amy lost her daughter, Gracie, in 2018. And just like most of us, over the past 5.5 years, Amy's been trying to figure out what that looks like and what her life is now. And Amy does amazing work in her own very small conservative community that she lives in to create safe spaces for children. We talked about so much today, and I don't want to get, overly wordy here in the intro. I want to be able to get onto the conversation, but I want you to know that we talked about some things that were kind of revisiting what we talked about before, but we took it farther, right? She refreshes us on what her lost story was, but she also shares a story that's extremely powerful about a woman that she met that admitted out loud to her that she had judged her family. So we talk a lot about things like that, things like stigma and stigmatizing situations in life and how we handle those as a family, but as a community. We talked about the whole "it can't happen to me" phenomenon. And even for those of you that are of the right generation, you might know what I'm talking about. We even referenced George Carlin in this section of what we were talking about. We also talk about Gracie's house and how she has Gracie's house up and running, and her plans and thoughts for the future with Gracie's house, including a camp. I'm just so excited about the things that Amy has going on in the world. I hope you'll stay with us for the entire conversation, because clear up until the very end, it's amazing content on, speaking your truth, eradicating shame, having opinions, all of these things and more. And we even talk about soup. So please buckle up. You're in for a good one today. It's just a little bit long, but worth every single minute. And let's go ahead and get started and welcome my friend Amy. Hi, Amy. Welcome back. I'm so excited to have you back on the podcast. You were on my short list to reach out to when you reached out to me. So we were of one mind when we were like, she needs to be back on the podcast, but you reached out and everybody's already heard the little intro. I'm going to ask you to start us by reminding us of your lost story. You haven't been on since August of 2022, and I will link that in the show notes if anybody wants to go back and listen to that episode. But I'd like you to tell us your lost story and then a little bit of why you're back today.
Awesome. I am so happy to be back. It's funny that you were thinking of reaching out. When I reached out, it was just sort of a bunch of things kind of happened. And I was like, hey, I should talk to Melissa about this, because sometimes not sometimes, every time I think these conversations are helpful because they're right here and accessible by other people. And therefore other people can see themselves or hear themselves in it and learn from it and then forgive themselves or, anything. But anyway, so hi, I'm so glad to be back. Thank you. My lost story. I lost my daughter, Gracie, 5.5 years ago to suicide. She was 16 years old. She was incredible musician, artist. She was, I guess now, I don't know if I would have, I did. I described her like this soon after she died, because there were a few friends of mine in the education sector who wanted to talk about what Gracie read, because Gracie read a lot of LGBTQ books, a lot of books about people unlike her. So people who like people of color, people, just anybody who wasn't just your basic stock white character, right? So she read a lot of history. She loved graphic novels and loved learning about other cultures and other experiences. And so between social justice and, oh, I just got lost right there in the first description, Melissa. That's hilarious. There's an example of mom brain,
of grief brain. Mom grief brain. Yeah, exactly. Everybody listening understands and probably appreciates that. Very real. So. That very real. I love being example. Very real with you.
Anyway, so we lost Gracie. She was incredible, and she still is incredible, even though she's gone. And where I'm trying, I just said to someone the other day, well, Gracie doesn't have hands anymore. I'm her hands now. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot to talk to you about when it comes to that. But it's been 5.5 years. It's wild. We were talking before the show that you're at 8, you said. That's wild. I feel like when we talked, you were here and I was at 3 or something. And it's just, it is wild how we move forward. But it's a journey. All right. It's been interesting. I want to talk to you today about my suicide loss survivor group and just talk about how much, I don't know, taught me, helped me, everything. Like there's so many things it did, but that's something I'd like to talk about. But sorry, I got lost in the description, but yeah.
That's okay. No. And it was December of 2018?
2018.
2018.
Yeah. 2018.
Yeah. Okay. So let's, first of all, I always like hearing about Gracie because she sounds just like such an amazing person and is an amazing soul. And you pointed that out, right? I felt it sounds like you've done even more. And that's what we do as we progress in this journey that we're now on. We do find that the way we look at things, the way we even look at our child changes, right? They go from being a child that formerly was alive to a child whose soul is still very much with us. And we are now doing our work as well as their work in the world. So to hear you acknowledge that, I do that too. I give Alex a lot of credit for a lot of the things things I do, but I was so lost in the beginning that I just couldn't get to that place. So yeah, I get it. Let's talk a little bit about your support group, and then you can segue into Gracie's house at some point or however that connects. But let's talk about the support group, because you started it after we talked last. So talk about what it is, what, all the things you want to talk about with it.
I will.
Just tell me.
So before the pandemic, we had a really steady suicide loss survivor group. And it was somewhere at a church kind of down the road from here. It was, probably 15 minutes drive. I didn't know the church. I didn't know anything. I'd seen it advertised, but I can't remember, was it on a website that I read this, or if I called and inquired, because, it was right after the loss. But they told me that they didn't take people who weren't 6 months bereaved. So if you weren't 6 months bereaved yet, you couldn't go to this group. And I wasn't. And so I was bummed. And then the pandemic happened and the group dissolved. Now, the guy who ran it for almost 20 years. What an epic person. Like, what a cool thing to offer for that long. And, he needs a break. And so off he went, and the group dissolved. And when I was going to places like the grief center, the local grief center that had some cool programming, especially for kids. So that was the first thing I did, was try and look after my surviving son. And I said, hey, how come you don't have one of these? And every time they would kind of just deflect, because of course, they're a nonprofit. They're working and they're doing a lot. They're also a hospice and all this stuff. Anyway, eventually somebody passed me over to Mental Health America, the local branch. And we talked, and they said, well, do you want to run it? Like, in that, I think almost, it might've been like look, we don't do this. Do you want to run it? As in, like, you're not going to want to run it. And I was like, sure. I have experience doing this. I used to run different types of groups in Ireland, but yeah, I don't have a problem sitting at the head of a table or anywhere at a table and running a peer group. That's absolutely fine. And then they were like, oh, really? Do you want some training? I'm like, sure, I'll take some training, whatever. So we trained a little bit, and I started the group. And almost immediately I met my now co-facilitator. She came in, she is a sibling loss survivor, and she's incredible. And she talks just like you and I do, just off the cuff, off the hip, and is very honest and very open. And the group grew. And what's been amazing is watching it. Well, it's the experiences, the things I've learned, the watching people come and go. People come when they need it, and they go when they don't anymore, which is exactly what you're supposed to do with any kind of, we'll call it therapy, even though this is really a peer group. But what's been amazing is watching, it always was, when I did that group with my son, I watched a bunch of kids who had different losses. We'll call some normal losses, like they lost their grandma, right? And when you're a kid, that's the order, right? That's the order of things. That's the correct order of loss. And so I watched my son go from, well, yeah, like, I have this tragic loss that nobody wants to talk about because no one wants to talk about suicide and all of this stuff, to the end of a 6-week course, embracing this other teenager because she lost it, because she lost her dog. And it was like, at one minute, it was like, oh, it's a dog. The next minute, it was like, oh my gosh, it's loss, right? And I think we talked about that last time. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And so the same thing in a way is happening. Not that nobody, I don't think, is being judgmental at all in my group. Everybody's really understanding. I think the ones that stick around, that they're relieved to have people talk so openly and honestly. We often talk, you and I talked last time, you said you'd link this in the notes, but you and I talked about prevention and the ideas, the myth of prevention versus the reality of prevention, we'll call it. And we even talked about that last night. Group was last night. But what I've learned is, like, nobody thinks it can happen to them. Right. And that actually, I've learned that in other areas of my life too, especially with, like, having a gay child, or even kids or people who are like, I think I'm trans and I'm in my 30s and I don't know what to do. It can happen to you too. So that's one. The other thing I've found is I've watched people display such incredible grace with each other. I've had a few people come in on day 2. In this last year and a half, I've had people arrive inside the first week. And I'm really glad I don't have a restriction like the last group did, because those people needed to be there. And it was good that they came, you know what I mean? And they came and went as they needed to, but that was pretty amazing. But I've learned, I had this, okay, so I wanted to tell you about this one story that was really interesting. So group runs for an hour and a half, but sometimes we go to 2 hours. And this one night, there was a new person in the group, and she was, I don't know what age she is. She's a little older than me, whatever. I don't know what age. I can't tell. Can you tell age anymore, Melissa? I can't tell.
Sometimes it's lost. It's kind of lost. 30-year-olds can look like a kid to me sometimes. And yeah, it's hard to tell.
So this woman comes in, she's very nice. And when a new person comes in, we know the drill. The drill is I usually start and I go clockwise and we introduce ourselves, our loss. And usually my co-facilitator says something like your favorite dinosaur, right? Or your favorite dog or something. And so we name these things and we go around. And so everybody knows where everybody stands. And so this person had lost their adult son and that was, maybe in his 40s or 50s and grand. And they didn't say much else during the meeting, which is fine. This is their first meeting. They didn't say much else. But toward the end of the meeting, I was talking about Gracie and she turned and she said, I knew you're Gracie. And I said, oh, wasn't she wonderful? And we talked about how wonderful and beautiful and loving Gracie was. And then she said, and I've used this in speeches. I'm a public speaker. For those of you who don't know, so I've been using this in certain speeches to certain audiences, specifically audiences who might be, I hate to say it this way, but I'm in America now in 2024, who might have opposing political views maybe to what I do. So they might think I'm talking from political spaces where I'm not. I'm talking from an academic space, right? With all of my, how do I say this? All of my facts on the screen are cited. They're all cited. But I often use this story in order to bring people together. This woman said to me, because it was the most merciful thing, I think, she said, I judged your family. And it was like one of the most weirdly beautiful things anyone ever said to me, because I knew I live in a small little town. I had a lot of gossip going on, and I knew how people were treating me. I knew who wasn't talking to me. I knew who was whispering when I was in the room. I knew those sorts of things, but I'd never had anyone had the balls, the courage and the mercy to look at me and be a human and say, I judged your family. And it was a beautiful thing. It was like, oh, thank you for telling me that. Yes. And that to me is a perfect sort of example of you didn't think it could happen to you, but it happened to you. And now you're merciful. Now you understand. And I wish that we could just do something. And it's hard because at the moment it seems like the trajectory for our whole country, right, is a judgmental, individualist, right, space. I think it always feels like that now, and in this simple thing, I don't know, I had hope in a way. And I don't know, the fact that one person was able to take their experience and learn from it and say that, I don't know, so that I could pass it on. It meant the world to me because we're judged. We are, especially when we lose our children, we're judged because there must have been something we could do, blah, blah, blah. And that's why people talking about prevention. I'll tell you about another story in a minute. The people who talk about prevention and so adamantly, and that's their main goal. I appreciate that so much. Of course, I want to prevent that. Oh my gosh, I want to prevent every death, but we can't. It's part of life. And sadly, so is suicide. And the fact that we don't talk about that is the reason, I guess, that people can judge so easily. And the people that, and the fact that we don't educate, I should say, the fact that we don't educate about it, the fact that we don't know the right words to say, the fact that more people than not still say commit like it's a crime, the fact that more people than not still say things that are so glib and so uninformed, but meeting her, I don't know, there's something that happened, Melissa. To have someone just admit it. It was like, yeah, you did. I know.
Yeah, but she used the word judged. So that means that given that she was sitting there with you now in the same room for the same reason, meant that she'd had, unfortunately, a forced epiphany, right? Of realizing that what you and I talked a little bit about before too is talking about that it can't happen to me phenomenon that just exists. It exists. I can't think of the episode right now, but what probably was not far from your original episode. I talked to a gal who highlights this in most of her episodes. She talks specifically, I actually think I may have titled her episode something to do with it can happen to anyone or something, because that was kind of her premise for wanting to talk initially. Was she talked about how she felt like she had lived the right life.
Yes.
She had done all the right things. She had belonged to the right groups. She had gone to church. She had been, conscientious in how she raised her children. She had cared about even the child who died, his mental health. She was involved in it. So she felt like she had done all of the right things to make her way to the kingdom perfectly intact, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
And yet she lost her son to suicide.
There isn't a person in my group who isn't in that space of, and I think that's where the prevention thing comes in for lost survivors. Because I don't know if I said this last time, but I mean, what really got me thinking about it was a bus stop poster. And it was a giant, the kind that's on the inside of standing in a shelter, a bus shelter. And it just said, suicide is preventable. And y'all, I couldn't sleep for 2 days. I was so upset. It's so simplified. It's so oversimplified. It's so wrong. That's
A
right.
lot of the messages say every suicide is preventable, and those ones still plague me.
Yeah, they should, because it's rubbish. And we talked about it before. I always say, oh, that's a sexy, that's how they get money. That's how they get donations.
Sexy.
It's sexy. That's a sexy idea, but it's not true. It's not true. And it's sort of, I wanted to drive back to that bus stop. It was, the county above me. And I wanted to just find who sponsored it so I could write them a letter and get involved in telling them they were full of it. And I realized that on the outside, that's how, it's very hard for those people to understand this. And I've met with a gentleman who works locally-ish in we'll say the mental health field, kind of. He's not a mental health provider, but he's in that field. And because I run the group, he thinks it's okay to send me very short, curt, and sadly detailed emails, or he thought, this is past tense now, he thought that was fine. And he kept doing it about a loss that happened today. First of all, he would think that I didn't know that. He needs to understand I'm far more connected than he thinks I am. But more importantly, he would do, method. I don't want to know the method. That's incredibly rude. Don't tell any. That's private information for the family. You telling me that makes you a gossip. That's what that makes you. It doesn't make you information.
And a sensationalist, because why?
Absolutely. Exactly. And then, so I would write back and say, I've said to you, please don't do this. I'm a bereaved mother. This triggers me. This hurts me. On top of that, you don't need to do this. Well, you run the group. Yeah. Okay. That has nothing to do with, I don't need to know every suicide. Please don't tell me because there's and I remember talking to this guy a while back, and he was, he's really lovely. He has great intentions. He doesn't listen. He can't seem to learn the basic etiquette around this, doesn't use the right words, or maybe he does now, I'm not sure. But it was just the whole, like, what I came up with, people who need to get the scoop. They need to get the scoop. They heard that someone died. They think it might be suicide. Let me get back to you. Okay, first of all, that's not how we talk about death, right? Second of all, the only reason any death. And let me tell you this, the minute, okay, if it's a young person, people are going to act like that. Fair, whatever. But the idea is, if that's how you're coming at a loss, you need to back up. Like, you don't need, first of all, it's none of your damn business. The scoop isn't yours, and you're not, anyway. But second of all,
apparently aspired to work for Inside Edition or something.
Right. But it was the fact that this person couldn't see that it would be incredibly disrespectful, right, to do this, including, but also is so driven by the prevention myth, okay, that he was attempting to show up at memorials and funerals of kids who died by suicide with prevention materials. Now, other people can't see your face, so I'm gonna just say.
I know.
Melissa just sent up a word to heaven there just for a second. And it's just like that. The fact that no one has been able to sit him down and explain it to him. I offered, but at the same time, I think that people thought that my bluntness, because as a loss survivor, I can be very blunt, but also
I was really blunt beforehand, so now it's really bad.
Same here. But I think it wasn't my bluntness that was the problem. It was actually the person on the other side who is very sensitive. And it's like, how can you be very sensitive and a sensational gossip about suicide at the same time? Like, pick one. But anyway, so it's interesting because, then what does that translate into? As someone who, look, I study human beings for a living. I write novels. I make up characters. I make up human beings. And the more real they are, the better the book is. That's how it works in my line of work. So it's like, when I think about real people and how layered they are and all that, but this person just is sort of one of those, it's just that, you're coming up against a wall, you're coming up against sort of, I don't know what, you're banging your head against a table, really, trying to say, hey, look, have some respect. And then immediately say, oh, she thinks I disrespect her. No, have some respect for these families who've lost. And this is a person who doesn't think that can happen to them. And then I go to another member of our community who is in charge of lots of things. That's so flippin' vague, but this person's in charge of a lot to do with education and very anti-trans and really listens to that one channel or those three channels that just can't see the other side of the humanity. And they have a trans child who's now homeless. And you're just like, I don't understand where your empathy is. There is a hole in you where your empathy should be. And the idea that you are so, it can happen to you. That's all I'm going to say. All of it. And it's happened to me. I do have a trans child. I do have a child who died by suicide. The two are not related. I'm actually in a very unique position for people who are like, oh, trans people, they're always talking about suicide and trans people. Yeah, it's not because they're mentally ill. It's because they're being bullied to death. They're being bullied to death by the adults around them, the kids. And this is ridiculous. It's because people don't understand because you're listening to the boob tube, because the propaganda laws were, dropped in 1982. And now we can just have lies on the television all the time. But more importantly, forget all those TV stories and all that sensationalism and getting the scoop and all that stuff. These are human beings, period. We're human beings, right? We are human beings. The people who died, the people we lost were human beings. And the people who are still alive and different to you are human beings. Where is your humanity? If trees can communicate with each other through incredible underground root systems for hundreds of years, if trees can mourn a tree that has died for 100 years, what the hell is wrong with us? And who the hell do we think we are to think that we are actually superior to trees? We are not. Trees are incredible. We suck. Now, I also think we're amazing because here we are having this conversation, right? And there are people here who are trying to open things and not close things. But it's kind of amazing, really, when you look at the black and whiteness of the world, of the judgmentalism that we are living through right now. And to know that, yeah, as survivors, we are on that side. We are judged. We're judged. And I go biblical then, right? And I'm a secular person head to toe, but I go biblical in my head because, look, man, don't you judge people. Just don't. Like, don't even start. Don't even think about judging people. And the minute you do, I don't know. There's a buoyancy in me. There's a buoyancy in me when I get judged. Because I'm like, oh, good. Okay. You judged me.
Yeah.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah. Good you. I have a story that came from a survivor in my group that I've cited several times. Of course, I keep everything anonymous and everything, but it was at the time she was still a fairly new bereaved mother. I'm going to say under 6 months. Mm-hmm. Lost her daughter, college age, similar age to Alex, and had lived in a neighborhood for a long time. Maybe didn't know these neighbors dearly, but knew who they were. And she's knelt in her flower garden, kind of behind a bush, tending to some flowers, probably for her daughter. And these two women, older women, walk by and are chatting. And one of the things that came out of their mouth, one of them said, that's where the girl lived that died by suicide. I hope they said died by suicide. I'm not going to put my words on it, but probably not. Yeah. I'm going to say that because that's what of course. But they said that's where that girl lived. And then the other lady, without missing a beat, said, yeah, you just never know how some people parent.
Yep. Yeah.
And in a different space, in a different place in her grief, maybe that mom would have stood up. That mom did not. That mom sunk probably, down to the depths of it froze her in her tracks because absolutely. That assumption, and it all comes back to that's because that's what keeps that person feeling safe at night. It has nothing to do truly with their judgment of this person's family or anything else. It's because that's how they sleep at night, because this goes right back to what we were talking about, because it can't happen to them because they parented their children correctly.
Oh, yeah. That's why I don't go to school board meetings. I mean, people are like, we need you and I'm like, I can't, because the superintendent said to me, you don't go to those meetings. And then I saw some of the meetings, on YouTube or whatever. And that's what they talk about. The fact that, we wouldn't lose our kid to suicide because we talk to our children. I was blue in the face. You know what I mean?
I had it happen in my family. Now I have an estranged family member, somebody who before, I live in the afterlife now. I call it my afterlife. Yeah. In my before life, I had a cousin that I thought I was close to. Of course, it was surface close. All my life, surface close. Imagine that. You can have that. And then after 2 years of an internal battle, I had to kind of call it quits, because no matter what I tried to talk to her about, she had a preconceived idea of suicide, and she would try to say the words that would make me feel good, but then she would say other things that were real, that were from her authentic self, that showed her fear, showed her all of the things. And I had to say, I can't come along with this anymore. She has implicit bias, I can't do it. I tried to explain it to her. I tried to say, and we have dads, like they were the only two brothers in the family. And so again, this was my same age. We had effectively grown up together across the country from each other, but grown up together, always seeing each other at grandma's and all the things. And suddenly I realized that just loving somebody, because I had other people that loved me that could come alongside of me, and yet some other people just aren't able to. And it came down to, she had a son that was struggling for a while during this 2-year period. And of course, yes, was I a little hypervigilant? Probably, of course, but not in a crazy pathological way. I was just trying to then say, okay, this needs to be taken seriously. We don't want this child to end up where my child was. And I basically got the no. What happened to Alex couldn't happen to my son.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then you kind of try to go, and why? And she couldn't, of course, make herself say, because apparently something else in her mind, there was something else, quote unquote, with Alex that just doesn't exist with me or my family. And I'm thinking, okay,
sure.
Well, now everything I said about this needing to no longer be a relationship still applies. Extra.
There's an
now we're
extra
going to
there.
extra that. And we're still in the same place. And of course, now it's, once a year, let's catch up cousin type stuff. And we do it for 5 minutes, and that's that. And so that's good. So, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
It is.
It's in the woman who turned away and walked away from me in the grocery store in my first months after losing Alex, that actually cured me of going to the grocery store, because that was such a horrible experience. First of all, to walk in, because you don't want to go out in public and run into all these people, but then to see someone who I'd sat next to the bleachers on for years in baseball, who I'd sat on steering committees with, who I'd done, like you and your community, done all the things with, should have approached me, hugged me, thinking of Alex, love you, saw me and whipped around, thinking I didn't see them. I could tell they thought I didn't see them yet, but I did, as they turned and tucked tail and ran.
Yeah.
And it's because if they embrace it, they have to admit it could be true for them too. It's that whole contagion, right? It's not the contagion in the true sense. It's the contagion that they somehow believe this is contagious. If they admit that it's real and that Alex died by suicide for reasons that don't appear to be obvious to the world, then, could this happen to my family too?
Well, it's interesting, because I think we talked about this, and I'll make it very short, this part, but Gracie died only a month and a week, I think 5 weeks after a very tragic car accident, killed 2 people right outside the school. And so then she died in the school 5 weeks later. So, and all of us were devastated when that accident happened. We were devastated. We had to meet our kids I had to meet the kids off the bus from a football game, because they were about to tell the kids that there was a loss already, and the first loss. There were 2 losses total, and it took a minute, but it was I was devastated. We cried, we sobbed. Well, the whole town sobbed for days. I can't even think about it now without sobbing or without crying a little. I made soup nonstop. I made 8 pots of soup. I just kept making soup, and I never thought that 4 weeks later that my daughter would be dead, first of all, but I never thought
that people would be making you soup.
Right. And this is the thing. I never expected to not have my daughter's death as respected as those other 2 deaths. To this day, there's a motto that was invented during that time that, had to do with the strength of the community and how we're all one, and, we're a family and all this stuff. And 5 weeks later, it seems that disappeared. And now every year they mark that day of the accident by posting these things up. And every year it puts a freaking knife in my heart and my back, because that's what it feels like. You know what I mean? And what it does is it just increases the stigma in this area. It just makes all these people down the road. There's people down the road. I call them the psychologist. There's his family down the road. And I just heard from my kid, because their kid told my kid to his face that they were all talking around the dinner table about us and some of the things they talked about at dinner table. And they were all psychoanalyzing everything in my family. And it was like, are
Oh,
they
that's
psychologists?
nice.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And so to find this out, I'm like, And I said to him when he told me this, I was like, are they psychologists? No. I'm like, next time I see them, I'm gonna be like, hey, are you a psych? He's like, Mom, please just don't say anything to them. And now recently he's like, you can totally ask them if they're psychologists. I don't care anymore. I'm like, good, you've grown, great. You've learned who your mother is, wonderful. But I'm not going to do that. But it's the same, like you said, you find out and you realize, you play the odds and you realize that most people are against you.
Yeah.
Because you lost a child. It's the weirdest thing. But if I lost a child another way, they'd be for me and there'd be posters all over their frickin' front doors. What the hell is this about? And it's just
the same thing happens in high schools when it's graduation time and the children who tragically died by disease or accident or other things there's not even a discussion about whether they're going to include them. It's accepted, it's known. Yeah. The parents know, the school probably a lot of times reaches out to them. But when it's the child that dies by suicide, I see it over and over again in my community, Amy. Yep. These parents have to fight to even get any acknowledgement that their child attended school, let alone a seat or a poem or fill in the blank, any recognition of their life. They want to hide under that. Yeah, no, if we talk about that person, then we're going to have this problem on our hands, because again, it's that notion that if we talk about it, we're going to have more suicides on our hand.
Right. And it's the opposite as you
And where do those people live? I mean, I'm just going to bring this up. Where do those people live that they don't see? It's on a clip and I can't pull it off, but they don't see the little smart device, mega worldwide computer in their kid's hand. Mm-hmm. Where is it that they think what rock is their kid hiding under that they think that talking about somebody's death by suicide is going to suddenly plant an idea in their child's head? The ideas in their children's head, they have no idea about because they're purposely staying out of touch with their children.
I just thought
because they're terrified of what child, and we got to, yeah, exactly.
You Go just ahead. Made me realize something. You made me realize something. Oh, I love new ideas, or probably an old idea to many other people. But the reason we tell our kids that suicide is a weak thing and a selfish thing is so that they don't do it.
Right.
That's the whole freaking point.
Yeah.
They don't want to be selfish or weak or stupid. You're not
selfish.
Or dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh my God, I never even thought of that. Well, it just shows you, like, I'm 54 years old and I love learning new stuff. But yeah, that's exactly it. And like you said, it is a safety thing. And it's so interesting to me that we can be now. I mean, in Gracie's class, there were 2 people who died by suicide and 2 people who died by that accident. And they were all memorialized the same way. Well, it was a pandemic, so it was really weird. I don't know what graduation would have looked like because there was no graduation in that way. But yeah, so the stigma and the bias against families and those who die by suicide is really inhumane. And we are living in an inhumane world. And I'm not going to get into that because I'm writing a speech on it right now. But
because we're living in unprecedented times.
We are. But it's interesting because, so now every year, and I'm very rightfully, people come around. I even talked to the people who started that group and said, hey, we always felt unincluded from that group. And then recently some things happened in our district where there were some articles written about saying goodbye to some administrators and things like this. And in those articles, the tragedies, how they traversed the tragedies with families, and it was only those tragedies. It was only the legitimate tragedies, not tragedy like ours. And I thought, there it is again. And I thought, I'm done. I'm done asking, fighting for it. I don't want to be part of that group then. You know what? If that group is that exclusionary, screw them. I'm done. I don't care.
And Gracie wouldn't have wanted you. If you think back to honoring Gracie, she would have said, fuck them, Mom. Excuse me, but not excuse me. It's my podcast. But it's I mean, that's what she would have, if she wouldn't have said that, she would have meant that, right?
Well, my favorite part is thinking about her. And actually, and this is no offense, those families are lovely. Those families are lovely. They've lost a child too. They're brilliant. It's the outside, the way that they handle it all, right? But like, what's so interesting is that I think about one of those, the one person who died in that accident, and she and Gracie are sitting there and looking down going, God damn, these people don't learn a damn thing. They don't learn a damn thing. And there's a part of them that's like having a good time, singing, having fun, doing their thing. But the other part of them is looking down at this town and going and crying because it's sad when you're on the other side and none of that bullshit matters. And you look down at these adults and they can't even fucking hold space for each other. Are you out of your mind? That one adult can't do that, and then the district, we don't want to include a suicide in that. Why? What's wrong with you? Did you not? Oh, well, you had some in your family. Oh my gosh, you carry shame. That's why you're shaming me. Oh my God, it's all such bullshit. But it's funny because when I think about Gracie, I think, well, what would she want? Like you say, what? And we try and we do things for I mean, I have always been like this. I'm a lifelong volunteer. I have enough going on in life that I didn't need to start a nonprofit, but I did because I was like, well, I don't know what this other group does. I don't know what other people are doing right here in the community, but I knew what I wanted to do in the community. And my son and I, for all these years, were like, okay, we're going to start a foundation, but what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm glad we waited 5.5 years because we didn't quite know. We knew last year what we wanted to do. And then we just started to build it in our heads. And the biggest thing for me is that I didn't want to concentrate on Gracie's death. I didn't want to start a suicide prevention group because I don't believe in suicide prevention. I believe very much that I'd like people to be healthier mentally, and I'd like more people to be educated about suicide and mental health. But I don't believe in the myth of preventing things that we can't prevent. I mean, I'd love to prevent cancer and Alzheimer's. I'd love to prevent a lot of things that hurt me.
Me too.
But I can't. And there we are. So we started Gracie's House. We finally launched, I guess, at the beginning of this year, and we're just in our year zero trying to get money together and get our operating budget met so that we can start doing the work at the end of next year, and then the full summer camp in the year after. I will tell you really quick what it's about. Gracie's House is all about safe spaces. Gracie was a member of the LGBTQ community. Her boyfriend, or I don't know how to call it, her boyfriend and his wife, her best friend, I don't know how to explain how that worked out, but I call them my son and daughter-in-law, and they're beautiful human beings. They're helping me on this journey as well. We want to run summer camps for LGBTQ youth because there aren't safe space summer camps here in my area in Pennsylvania. There are several around the country. There are many around the country, but not enough. There's a lot of waiting lists, a lot of application processes and things like this, where I would like to just have kids go to camp, because camp was the makings of me. Gracie loved camp. Her brother loved camp. We all love camp. And there's a
Who doesn't
space.
love camp? I mean,
Oh
camp
my
was
gosh.
great.
Oh, get ready, Melissa. I'm doing adult camps. I'm doing adult
Woo.
weekend camps. Found family camps, doing all kinds of camps. It's going to be fun. But we
I want
also
to be a camp counselor. Can I be a camp
yeah,
counselor?
we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
I'm not even joking. That would be awesome.
It is really cool. And I have actually, if you go to my Instagram, I have a picture right now. I posted it late last night of me as a camp counselor 37 years ago. And I'm wearing a sailor hat. And I have a pretty impressive mullet, but you can't really tell in the picture, which is
Awesome.
great. Yeah. But yeah, so I wanted to do that. And so our main focus is safe spaces. So that means that we're giving grants to local places that run, that have safe spaces for community, engagement, where, queer kids and their families can feel welcome, or queer parents and their kids can feel welcome and safe. And then also expression workshops, which I'm not going to get into now, but the camp at the moment is my main focus. That's my main target. And my target is having hopefully a full camp in 2026, and be advertising and ready and getting people ready this time next year to launch some of those weekend camps in the fall off season. So I can't tell you, it's one of the most beautiful camps that I've ever been at. It's award winning, and I'm excited about it. So that's what I wanted to do because it's positive and it helps people. And that's what Gracie was really vocal about, helping queer kids, especially trans kids, because at that time, there really were no rules yet in the school system. And so like teachers would misgender and misname, and she would aggressively correct them, to the point where I got a few letters, and I was like, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to learn the rules. My kid's going to, correct you until you get it right. And she's not wrong. And she's not rude. So, that's what I decided. I don't want to say that anything else is negative. It was just, for me, it was a good positive focus, and I can help kids. And at the moment, because, I'm in a unique position to have, a child who died by suicide and a trans child who has no depression, but who is, luckily I keep them as much as I can. I mean, they have a phone in their pocket, but I don't have a television on. And I don't sit there in front of them going, oh God, there's more anti-trans laws today. I don't, I just don't talk about it. What are we doing today? We're going driving. We're going to go, buy a suit. What are we doing today? And that's pretty much where I'm at. So, but that's what Gracie's House came from. And that idea of it not being able to happen. And that idea of, listen, I'm not ashamed of how my daughter died. I am her hands now. I am her energy. I will do with my hands what she would have wanted to do with her name. And that's the best I got. I mean, can I be a jazz musician like she was? No, I wish I could, man. If I could use my hands to play that saxophone that I will never sell or give away, I will give it away. I will give it away. I've said it to the band director. I'm like, if you find another kid who's like an improv jazz prodigy and doesn't have a good sax, you let me know, and they can have that sax. Anyway, yeah, I wanted to do something with my hands that she would want And both of us, my son and I both wanted to do that. He's got to go to college and do stuff. So he's kind of a voting member on the board, but also, and he hopefully will be our TikTok maker. That's the best I got, right?
Right, right.
Right now he's going to go and be do incredible things in school because he's a really stellar student, unlike his mother. But that's what I'm doing with that. And that's kind of how I'm kind of trying to take all that knowledge that I have from the group, from life, from living as a bereaved mom, from hearing. I haven't heard what that woman heard while she was gardening. And my heart broke when you told me that. And yet we all know it's that woman being so merciful to say it to my face, right? Do you know how many people walk by my house? I'm sure they think that the reason Gracie's dead is because I fly a rainbow flag. So there are people in this town who believe those two things correlate because they don't turn the channel on their television. And I can't wipe out ignorance in one foul. All I can do is do good things for the community. And that's what I plan to do. And they'll fight me on it because it's about queer stuff, but they got to face a few things. And one of them is that there's a lot of queer people.
Yeah, exactly.
They need to be okay with that.
So a couple of things came to mind when you were first talking about when people say it's selfish and that stuff. I had a moment that I haven't had in all these years too. So apparently it's probably our kids giving us moments, right? Uh-huh. Going, here, I got one for you, Mom. But all of a sudden and you'll remember this, I had George Carlin flash into my mind with his whole NIMBY speech, right? We have this whole faction of people in the world, and he wasn't speaking to this kind of thing, but he might as well have been. We have a culture and a society in this Western world of not in my backyard. For those of you that are younger and don't get the NIMBY thing, it was not in my backyard. And it was part of a big George Carlin speech. And it was much more colorful than I'm going to make it. But it was about, don't put your pink house next to my house. Don't put your sex shop next to and it sure as heck would have been, we're not going to talk about the gay, queer, or child who died by suicide that lived in our community. It would have been all of that, not in my backyard, because I'm safe. His whole monologue around that NIMBY thing was because I get to stay safe in my bubble if those things aren't in my periphery. If I can't see them, they don't exist. If I don't know about them, they don't exist. If, we're just going to brush that stuff off. Nope, not in my backyard. And so that came to my mind, right, of the whole safety bubble that the world wants to live in. And so, he was before his time, I guess, in that thought process.
Always was.
Something else that I thought about, because one of the things I had written down was just in writing and hadn't even put it in our show note or talking points, was I wanted to talk a little bit about how do we even affect a real change, because I know you have definite ideas on this. I do too. Sometimes getting them to be cohesive and come together at the same time are very hard. But I was pointed to a documentary that I didn't know exists. It's not brand new, so you may know about it. It's by Ken Burns. It's a PBS documentary, but it's called Hiding in Plain Sight: the Youth Mental Health Illness, and it's a film by Eric Ewers. So it's a 2-part documentary series. It's 4 hours in total. I watched most of it, binged watched most of it last night and the rest of it this morning, because I just felt strongly that for some reason I was pointed to it on purpose right before this interview. and because I thought that's what it's about. And they have a trans kid highlighted on the cover of the movie, but it was 20 different individuals throughout this 4-hour documentary that's done in 2 parts that talk about the reality of youth mental illness and the reality of, and they talk about suicidality, and they specifically concentrate on that in the second one. And I think every single kid in the United States should watch this documentary and anything like it, because in my opinion, and this is an oversimplification, but I want you to address it in more detail. One of our biggest problems is, one, we don't give kids credit for being smart and telling us what they need to hear, how they need to hear it, what they want from a situation. We assume what they should need or want, or how they should be therapized or talked to or treated, because they cover everything from, have you heard of that documentary by chance?
I haven't. And okay. I mean, I'll talk about it in a second, but yeah, okay. Go ahead.
But so, they talk about it's providers, it's advocates, it's the kids themselves. The kids talk about what doesn't work. They went there. My husband was like, he knows me, so he just ignores it now. But as I come, as they go where I thought they were going to go, I'm like this. I'm like, please go there. And then they go there and you come dancing into the room. I'm like, they're going there. And he's like, calm down. I'm like, this is what I wanted them to do. Now they didn't go deep enough and whatever, but it was, there's limited time. So,
Right.
but they had started in documentary 2 talking about medications, and almost without fail. And I say almost without fail because there are places that a medication is needed temporarily, sometimes long-term if it's certain issues, but for the most part, mental health meds, anxiety meds, whatever term you want to put on it, fail over and over and over again. Again, my podcast, so I can say that. My opinion, y'all. I'm not a doctor, but they do over and over again. You hear that now. Again, that doesn't mean they don't serve a purpose at times, but you hear over and over again how they made my symptoms worse, how I wasn't truly suicidal until I was on this medication.
Yeah.
And it's because we have a healthcare system that's so broken, and we don't have time to go into all of that. But it's partially because of that. So the doctors are really quickly right now, whatever script they think or whatever one they're getting the biggest kickback for this week or whatever, and we could go political there and we won't, but the whole, and then they're giving it to them, but yet some of the side effects are worse than what they're trying to treat. And they went to an Eastern medicine place where they showed kids that were going to places like 3-month camps where they were meditating, where they were getting into nature, where they were having immersion sound baths that were really speaking to their soul and centering their energy centers and all the things. And these kids then talking about how, oh, this is what mattered. This is what made a difference. You can give me a pill all day long and it's not helping. And oh, by the way, every time you have to give me a new pill, the message you're sending is nothing's going to fix me. I'm just broken. Instead of this whole broken dichotomy we have in this United States that goes along with our institutionalized education and everything, that we just believe we're going to soldier everybody on through the little factory, send them through the machine, and they're all we feel the same way with healthcare. We don't stop and say, let's look at the whole person. Let's look at their environment. Let's look at, because we have an overstimulated environment. It takes too much energy. So it's just give them a pill. Just give them a fucking pill instead of giving them the tools and the resources they need to learn to live a healthy, successful life, whatever that looks like for them. There are people, I have a brother who needs to live where he lives in Montana, in the mountains around very little human beings. And he was very smart 30 years ago to know he needed to be away from the crap, the people, the world, whatever. He would probably not be alive today if he hadn't chosen the lifestyle he had. Right. Some people can't live in the center of Manhattan, working on the stock exchange and whatever, and not be suicidal.
Absolutely. Okay.
So I know I just went like this and just dumped a huge amount of shit on you.
But it's my wheelhouse. You just basically started talking about teenagers, and teenagers are why I work. That's what I do. Teenagers.
There we go.
Segue.
Health, there you
this
go.
Is me, right? This is what I do. So, when I think about it, I'm like, okay, first of all, you're like, oh, we don't give kids credit. We don't give kids credit for anything, period. We don't give teenagers credit for anything, nothing. We make fun of them. We do worse than not give them credit. We bully them actively. Right. We bully them constantly. We've been bullying them since the minute their age started with the number 1. We make fun of their loves, their music, what they like, the things they wear. We'll say things like, oh yeah, I guess the 80s are back in again. How about, I like your hair? How about, hey, that top is really cool, or anything. Like, you could say a million different things, but we're just constantly encouraged to bully kids. We're constantly encouraged to tell them how little they know and take things away from them. Now, there were 3 organizations. It was the American Pediatric Association, the American Medical Association, and I think it was psychiatric, but I can't remember which one. So I don't want to say which org it was, but they all came out post-pandemic. I think it was 2022, and gave an incredibly large warning about a mental health epidemic in the teen world, and no one seemed to give a crap. And when I say this, I'm going to say some stuff. It's your podcast, but I'll say some stuff. Like,
you have my blessing. Go ahead.
Like, let me get this straight. So there's a mental health epidemic. People are dying by suicide. Teens are dying by suicide at an alarmingly large rate. There's another study about how many girls are raped or forced into sex before they're, 16 to 18 years old, and how their mental health, like the girls' mental health, has just plummeted. Is actually too weak of a word to talk about teen girls in America right now. We've forced all kinds of things. Why don't we send teenagers to school so that school starts at 9 or 10 o'clock? How many years have we known that is a mental health problem right there? Why don't we, when my daughter came out of inpatient, she was immediately pressured when she got back to school to make up her work. What the hell are you doing? Why the hell haven't we stopped school shootings? Can I just say that? Yeah, there's some laws we could put into place, but nobody's doing it because I'm not sure why. Why the hell can't we stop? Oh, because, well, none of us can agree. Oh, shut up. Lock yourselves in a convention center and fucking figure it out. Figure it out and vote. I don't care. Like, oh, well, this guy it doesn't fit me quite well. I don't give a shit if it fits you a little funky. Vote for the people who are going to keep kids alive. What the hell is wrong with you? Now, more importantly, on an easier level, stop bullying kids. Let them read the fucking books they need to read to feel sane. Thank you. I was allowed to read whatever books made me feel sane. And, well, I don't agree with this. I was just at Pride this weekend at the local, like our nearest city. And I was walking in and I had a t-shirt on that said, "What's more punk than your public library?" I wore that to Pride because only about back in March, there was a bomb threat because they were going to do a drag story hour at the public library in our city. And there was a bomb threat because the two county commissioners riled everybody up into a hatred cyclone. And everybody's like, we hate drag queens. Drag queens are going to abuse our kids. No, honey, it's a public event. They're just going to read a freaking story. Calm down. But nobody did. So I wore this thing. And this guy says to me, he says, "Oh, can I take a picture of your shirt?" And I said, "Sure." And thinking that he was, well-meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And, everyone else in that place was well-meaning. This guy was outside of Pride. I let him take a picture of the shirt. And I said, "So you in libraries?" And he kind of giggles a little and says, "Well, kind of." And I go, "Yeah, like, what do you do?" And I'm being all me. I'm innocent. I take everybody straight up. You obviously are interested in libraries. What's your deal? Eventually, he goes on to explain that he's the guy who reads what he thinks are inappropriate or spicy passages from young adult books to school boards, to his school board. So he is one of those guys. And I go, "Oh, that's interesting." And then he says to me, and I apologize to the listeners whom this might make uncomfortable. He says, "Do you believe in a book about masturbation that's made for seventh graders?" I said, "Well, first of all, I work in publishing. There's no such thing as a book made for seventh graders. Are you telling me that this is required reading for the seventh grade at your school district?" "Oh, it's in the library." "Okay, it's in the library. So it's about masturbation." "Yeah. Do you think seventh graders masturbate?" I say. And at that point, I can't believe that he hasn't had this question asked to him before, but he just kind of froze. And he goes, "Well, yeah." And I go, "Oh, so they can do it, but not read about it. That's weird. Can you do me a favor and delete that picture off your phone? Thanks." And then I walked inside and dealt with the real people who were really cool for the rest of the day. But it's this idea that these people just, "Oh, we're protecting the kids." No, you're not. You're hurting them. Taking away books. Okay. And books. Listen, I'm doing my PhD on this. I could sit here and talk to you about Louise Rosenblatt, who wrote a book in 1938, all about the exploration of literature and what it really does when we read and how we can feel seen by a book, right? And by a character, and we can feel better, right? About ourselves because we read about someone else's struggle that's just like ours. That's been alive forever. No one's really done beyond what Rosenblatt did. I mean, there's plenty of people who do, actually. They do. Oh, they go off in different directions, but we've never built on it to say that, listen, sometimes we watch TV shows because they make us feel good because we can see our lives in them. Even you the other night with that documentary, right? That in itself, that spoke to you because it spoke to things that you had experienced. These are the things that entertainment do for us. And this person is like, or in this case, this is a nonfiction book. So information also helps. I remember, I just read some stuff only 2 days ago, yesterday morning. I Google stuff that hurts me, things that have happened to me. And when I read other people's stories that they also went through what I went through, well, that makes me feel better. It's very simple. It's a very simple thing. That's why we're having this. This is why you have a podcast.
Yep.
This is why we're having the conversation, right?
That's what I was thinking. Like,
right. And yet these people are like, "Well, let's take these books out because I don't agree with gay children." Well, guess what? Gay children exist. I don't care if you agree with them or not. If you remove the books about gay children from their libraries, they're going to feel alone and hated. And guess what? Then they're going to feel crappy. And then things are going to go south for them. And that's not cool. Removing these books, including especially ones about mental health and suicidal ideation, from school districts, school libraries, is akin to removing the fire extinguishers when you're about to light the place on fire. And the place is being lit on fire because these people are outside talking like this. So I wouldn't allow my kids to go to a school board meeting. The things that they say about gay kids, they even allow, like, where is your gavel? Use the gavel. If someone starts saying insane stuff, use the gavel and say, "You have to go now." I'm sorry, that's inappropriate
I want
conversation.
A gavel.
Let's get each other gavels. We can just, on your podcast, you can hit the gavel. But anyway, when it comes down to, like, you were talking about medications, going to switch over there really quick. And it's interesting you say that, because as someone who meditates and as someone who really is a big, meditator, mindfulness person, I actually have a sound bowl that I got, and it's aligned to my heart chakra. And I will chill out with that. I agree with you. The problem is it's not covered by insurance. The problem is, like you said, it's the American medical system. It's the system is so messed up here. I do think some medications probably do work for some people, I guess. You know what I mean? It definitely, I thought it worked for Gracie for a while, but I mean, they put her on a new medication right before she died. And you know, people would be like, that was because of the medication. I had the one sister who was on the scoop and decided the scoop was, well, she had to scoop like a whole lifetime of scoops. But like there, it had to, oh, it was the medication. No, you know what? It was a factor of, it was many different things, including
And
actually.
could the medication have contributed? Sure, it could have.
Absolutely.
But and yeah, I
But
mean,
was it helping? I don't
Alex
think so.
Alex went to the counseling center at his college, and you know, I have never, nobody's ever heard me get on a platform, and they won't hear me do it, that, oh, it was the medication he was given, because I don't think he took it long enough to have affected him. I think the problem was there already, and you know, it other things. But the fact is that his counseling center saw him once with no previous medical history. Let me say that again. It isn't like he didn't provide it to
Wow.
them. He didn't have any previous medical history for them. I mean, I took them to counsel when they were little kids when I got divorced the first time, because that's what you do.
Yeah.
But no mental health history of seeing counselors or anything. So it isn't like he had some big file imported and they went off of that one session. And I would have never known this had he not died and I got his records. They had written in his records when they gave him a prescription that he was bipolar.
What? After one session?
Yeah, in a school counseling center.
How
First of
old
all,
was he?
Alex wasn't. He was 21. He wasn't bipolar. I mean, I can just say that as his mom. I mean, am I against him being bipolar? No, he just wasn't. But I guess it was their way of having, you know, the only way they could have given him a script, which was to get him to go away. They had to put a diagnosis in there.
Yep, that's right.
How fucked up is that?
That's messed up.
Is that? And luckily, I don't tie the medication to his death, or they would be in a world of fucking hurt.
Right.
You know, if I really felt like it was the medication that caused it and we had enough to prove that or anything.
Yeah, you'd have to, yeah.
But I don't. And I don't think that. But I still sit jaw on the floor every time. I don't look at it much anymore. But anytime I see that, I just think, how in the world did somebody, and if it happened to my kid, it happened to other people's kids. And there are other people's kids who the medication might have been the cause of what happened. And we're just blanket writing prescriptions and diagnoses out, hoping nobody ever sees them, because that's their way of dealing with it.
The inpatient where Gracie was, there was the doctor that was in charge, so writing the prescriptions, and the psychiatrist who gave her that new medication. He had said to her, I got a call out of the blue, right, one day. And of course, I have a job. I'm doing stuff and I'm raising another person. And at the time, I had we'll just say a complicated household when it comes to, I still do, when it comes to
who lives there and all the things. Yes.
Correct.
Yes, yeah. The family structure. Yep.
Yes. And so it was complicated, not in this is the reason why my daughter died. No, like it was just complicated because it was. And this is how we lived. So anyway, I get a call from the inpatient center and they said the doctor would like to have I guess it was a Zoom at this time on this day. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I have a meeting that day at that time. Is there another time we could do it? And she was like, I'll get back to you. So she was really cool and everything was great. And then I find from Gracie tells me that the psychiatrist said to her, oh, your mother didn't even want to meet with me, so she doesn't even care about you. And I'm like, are you sure he said it that way? She said, yeah. So I called the place. Because I visited her, somebody was visiting her every night. It was an hour and a half drive and we were driving out. And I was like, excuse me, this was said to my daughter. Oh, well, you didn't make an appointment. No, I did make I had a meeting. I have a job and a life. I couldn't reschedule that meeting. I told them to call me back, and I'm not in the office that day and we can't talk. So I never got to talk to him, but he was the one who, was this irresponsible. And, you think about that record and the fact that I could look at that. And again, the world of hurt and all of that, but I don't look. Gracie struggled a long time. I don't know what else to say. I don't know. It's just so weird. And the help, like I told you, I think the last time we met, I mean, she was on a waiting list when she got out of that inpatient center for a psychiatrist. And when they called me 2 months after she died and said, hey, Gracie's, place has come up. She's ready to go. We're ready to go. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Gracie died 2 months ago by suicide. They said, well, why didn't you call us? That's how they treated a bereaved mom at that moment.
Oh my gosh.
Why didn't you call us?
Why didn't you call us? About what? Before she died or after she died? Were they meaning? I mean, seriously.
They call after she died to take her off the waiting list. Now, no offense. At that point, scratch her name out and say, I'm sorry for your loss and hang up the phone. Have some goddamn manners. What's wrong with you? And that's the problem. That is the problem. That it's immediately like a reason to mistreat. So I go back to that unique position I'm in. Now I've got a pride flag outside. People will spit at my house, throw eggs at my house, call me a faggot as they drive by. Excuse the word, but that's what they say. And actually, they say the effing faggot. So there you go. I'm like gardening, trying to pull some weeds, and I stand up and I'm like, people are screaming out their car at me because like, what's wrong with you people? But that's what we have. We have this judgmental thing where people are like, you're not human enough for me to care about you. And then you lose your child and you also end up in that space. You're not human enough for me to not gossip about you in front of your own house. Like, what is wrong with people? And I go back to the fact that half the time these people are following a religion that is the centerpiece of their life, and they are acting so unlike Jesus. I don't even know what to do. Because you know what Jesus would be doing right now. I don't mean to be sacrilegious to anyone listening, and I respect all religions. But from what I know of Jesus, and I've read quite a bit about him, and I know a good few people who know a lot about him.
There's a big book about him.
I hear it's a bestseller. And he would be hanging out with trans kids. He'd be protecting them. That's what he would be doing. And we all know it. And if you don't, now you've just heard me say it. And instead of going, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. What a blah, blah, blah. Go, oh, what did she mean by that? Have curiosity, learn, grow. That's the point. And as bereaved parents, that's what our job is. We learn and grow. And now we give back to the world the things we've learned. Because again, we talked about this before. And everybody says it. Khalil Gibran says it. I just saw it the other day about how your capacity for joy is increased by your tragedy. So when we have such things happen to us, this is a complicated loss from the get-go because your community turns against you, even though they're right to your face. They're right there. They could be your family. And how many of us have had these secondary and tertiary losses of our family members,
all of us,
our friends, of our community members, of the people who were allies? They're now not allies. They're not necessarily enemies, but they walk by your house and say crap like that. They talk the back off you. We are here, but we also have a greater capacity for joy. So when we feel joy, it's ginormous. And I wouldn't wish the loss on anybody, but with that joy, I feel like I can do cool things with my hands and with my mind and with my brain, including opening other people's hands and hearts and minds. That's the point. And that's why I write books. It's why I did Gracie's house, because I'm like, look, who's going to come up against me trying to run a camp for kids? Okay, you want to why? Like, why? And also shut up and leave me alone. Like, it's easy. The block button's easy. It's pretty cool. I mean, and the bonus of doing this is like, people are like, this is kind of gutsy where you are. Like, and I am. I'm in a pretty, I call them white nationalists versus Christian nationalists, because I have too much respect for Christians to put the two together, because white nationalists are white nationalists. I grew up in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and I got lumps on my head from white nationalists of different types. But like, that's where I live. And okay, maybe it's a little risky to start a nonprofit to benefit, LGBTQ kids, but I don't think it is. But I'm also, because of my job, I already get death threats and hate mail, because writing for children is a terrible thing to do, Melissa. Apparently, I'm a terrible person because I do this.
Yeah, because you're giving them thoughts. You're giving them. Them credit. You're giving them.
Yeah, a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Especially in my book.
How dare you give them credit for thinking and having original thoughts and all the how do we make a difference? How do we make an impact? Like, how do you simplify that? I mean, can you simplify that? It's not simple. It's beyond not simple. But how do we start? How does somebody else start to do any of what could be done? How does somebody else do what you're doing? How does somebody else decide? I mean, I always say you just decide and you do, but
it's scary.
Some people think it is scary. Yeah, it's scary to start a podcast, do support groups, write books. It's scary. It's scary. So how do you do it?
You figure out what your comfort zone is. I think that's why it took me I'm glad I waited the 5.5 years or 5 years to start the nonprofit, because I thought, well, what am I comfortable doing? I couldn't work in suicide prevention because I don't want to say I don't believe in it, but I don't believe we're there. Then therefore I could work in suicide education. Well, I already do. That's where I volunteer. So I'm still doing that. And that's risk free, because honestly I could be like, I'm burned out. I'm out anytime I want.
And you already work in the bereavement space. You volunteer there. So
that's it. Right. So and I can walk away from that if I want to, but that's really actually been some of the most helpful stuff I've done. And it's very limited very small timing, small training, and it's a peer group. So really, I'm not running it. I mean, I'm running it, meaning I know the combination to the door lock.
Right.
That's it. You know what I mean? Other than that, like
You're going to make the pot of coffee and open the door.
that's it. You know, the whole point of a peer group is that it's not my group. I mean, like I said, I open the door, but the people who come, and yeah, okay, they do rely on me to maybe start the conversation, but like you, I'm a conversationalist. I can have a conversation and I can say those things. And we talk like it's always interesting when you have a new batch because of course there's people in and then they go out. They use it as they need it. It's not, you know, I'm not
That's
offended
what
when
it
people
should be
leave.
for. Right.
Exactly. When people leave,
Me
I'm
either.
thrilled. I'm like, oh, off you go. And
Yeah.
check in from time to
And
time.
come back if you need it. Like,
Right.
because we know this happens, right? And sometimes the
Absolutely.
hill's really high and the dip is really long. And other times we go through a valley for a very long time before
right.
we have another hill to climb. And so we'll be there when you're climbing your next hill. But
Yep.
yeah, we have to let them celebrate the moments that they're in the valley,
Absolutely.
so to speak. But
Yeah. So those sorts of things, right, is one. Other than that, you speak your truth and you find this, and you're allowed to have opinions. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I'm so lucky that I had whatever it was sewn in to me. It's not necessarily confidence because I had the confidence, you know, pushed out of me for 30 years of a really dangerous relationship, we'll say. But like, I knew my feelings were important and I have opinions that I can stand behind. So like you just said earlier, you know, when you were talking about medication, this is your belief and and so therefore you can talk about that and you can talk probably at length about that because knowing you've probably read a lot about it and you probably know a lot about it. You also have experience. And this is one of the things we do with teenagers is we deny them their lived experience, right? That's the whole point. They're not queer. They haven't been raped. They haven't had this. They haven't had that. In fact, most kids have had trauma before they're 18. In fact, all American children have had trauma because now we are doing active shooter drills and since preschool. And again, I can cite, if you don't agree with me, that's great, but I can cite you. I'm doing my PhD on this. I can send you many articles to talk about the mental health of young people, specifically relating to intruder drills and the fact that we can't solve this problem because we're too bought. It's capitalism, really. It's just capitalism, which is a shame. It's money. And most of us don't have it. So I don't understand why we're living under this bizarre idea, but we're not going to get into propaganda and the laws because I know way too much about that. Anyway, what can you do? First, stand in your truth. Be really strongly an advocate for yourself and your beautiful child who you lost. And, you know, sometimes we don't know, right? I know from the group, half the people in my group are like, we had no idea that so-and-so was struggling. We had no idea. That's not on you. That's okay. This is how it's a silent struggle. I mean, listen to what we talked about for the last hour. We talked about how most people judge it. Most people don't want to believe it. Most people don't think it can happen to them. How many people, 70% of teen mental illness goes undiagnosed and untreated, meaning the diagnosed stuff is also untreated. We don't treat our teens. You'll get over it. I was a teen once, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff, it's all bullshit. Everybody's different. Every single person. Your kid is different to you. You know, your kid was and so you stand in your
we
truth.
don't get to tell our teenagers today that we know what they're going through because
Correct.
This truly is. And teens in this documentary I talked about said it. And, you know, I hadn't heard teens say it because my teens are no longer teens. Right.
Right.
But that the times there was a teenager in this documentary that said, because of what I know about the past, I can tell you that I believe we are now living in the hardest time for teenagers to be kids ever. 100%. And I agree with that.
100%.
Yeah, I do too. And so, but for a teen to realize that and to say, it was like he was saying, cut us some goddamn slack.
And yet
it's hard enough to be an adult in this world, let alone try to become an adult, try to live through, and they're being forced to take in information that they're, I can't even, I'll go down a rabbit hole.
And that's why I work and live in service to children. I have always worked and lived in service to children and teenagers specifically. A lot of my writer friends are like, oh, they moved to like middle grade, so they get to go to middle schools and maybe upper elementary. They're like, how do you do high schools? I'm like, oh, dude, there's nothing like walking into a high school auditorium. You got a whole auditorium full of kids that are like, oh God, what's this person going to say? And then I walk up and say, hi, adults don't respect you. How you doing? And they're like, whoa, she said something real. And I'm like, oh, just wait. And then I say more real things. And I talk to them about their mental health without ever saying mental health, without ever saying depression, without ever saying anxiety, without ever saying suicide for sure. No, I don't say anything. I don't say trauma. I don't say any of that. But what I say is the allowed words, which is if you're feeling a little funky for longer than usual, you should talk to a trusted adult. And, you know, it sounds dumb, but that's all I'm allowed to say because there's so many different people that are trying to remove those fire extinguishers, which are words, by the way, and feelings and love and things like this. Because I guess the idea is if you don't love a gay kid, then they'll go straight, right? So if you don't love a mentally ill child, while, then they'll get better, right? I guess that's the whole point. And so I think the biggest thing that we can do generally, because I will say, I feel really fortunate that I already had the career I had. So therefore I could step into this nonprofit work with the confidence, although I'm scared shitless every day. Like I'm scared of this every day. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to fail. And then I went up to camp the other night and I was like, no, we can make this happen. Okay. And let's really try and figure out the blocks of this one thing. It's a wide ranging nonprofit, but let's just one thing at a time. All right. And, that's a bigger thing. And I get it. And there's people who are like, I want to start a 5K to raise money for suicide prevention because my kid died. That's cool. Do that. Because every single time you're doing anything, even talking openly and honestly about suicide, you are educating somebody somewhere, right? I recently had 2 people reach out to me. I'm going to tell you about them. And I know we have to cut this from at some point soon. I had one person reach out to me. She's a young person. She was actually connected to me through somebody who was a connection that was both to Gracie and to me. It was interesting, but she said basically that she wanted to start going into schools and talking about her attempt. She had attempted and nearly died. And actually it was most terrifying. Her experience was terrifying. And as a parent who's lost a child to suicide, it must be really weird to think, oh my gosh, you're talking to someone who's alive, but they attempted. I'm like, yeah, I am. And she really wants to go into schools. And I had to say to her, look, they're not going to let you into schools talking about that. I'm sorry, they're not. I know that because I know I go to schools. That's what I do, And I talk about books and I talk about really cool
And I know
stuff.
the long list of things they give me that I can't say.
Right. Well, they don't. They know. And that's okay. It's not really, but whatever. So I said, hey, instead of that, then why don't we record a series on Zoom like this? And through Mental Health America, I'll talk to my executive director over there and see if she'd be interested, because she's been talking to me because of my situations with different people not respecting and not understanding how to act around suicide, how to consider and think about the people who, us millions and millions of loss survivors. They say there's 10 million, but that's only if you count 3 or 4 survivors per person who we lost. There's millions and millions of us. I don't know if anybody in this country, in fact, I know I've done the research again, there isn't a person in the country who hasn't been touched by trauma. There's plenty of people denying it and whatever. So shoot, where was I going? Hold on. Kids going into schools. What the heck was I going to say? I don't remember. But what I know is that, yeah, how do we do it? Do what you do. You do you. Just make sure you have your own, you have opinions and you have that, the education's already in you. You have the lived experience. And you can talk about it. And but if you're not ready to, don't. And if you're not someone who can talk, don't. But if you're in a church and your church, like I had somebody who actually was one of the people that was another bereaved mom, but they didn't lose their child to suicide. And she said that she's been educating her youth group at the church about suicide. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so wonderful. Tell me what you're saying. And she was pretty spot on. And I was thrilled about it. She was talking about mental health. She said, no one's ever talked in the church because it wasn't allowed. It wasn't allowed in the church to talk about mental health. And I was like, oh my goodness. Well, I'm really glad you're doing it. So again, to you and I, that's like, oh, my God, we talk about mental health every day. But there are people who are being kept from this information by their pastors or by their, families or by wherever, their communities. And in actual fact, this information, is actually life-saving. This is life-saving information. This is how you save the next kid. It's the other way around. It's the opposite of what they tell you.
It is.
Not right.
It's what I say. There's really not prevention as much as it's become coined postvention, but really just talking about all of it and is where it's at. That's how we're going to make a difference, is talking about it, giving platforms, respecting, not bullying, all the different things. It's all very simple. Mm-hmm. And yet we fucking make it so complicated.
I remember what I was saying now. It was the 2 people that got in touch. So that was the one person, the young woman. So we're going to do something positive. How excellent. She's going to take her experience. I'm going to take my experience. We're going to have an incredible conversation, and that will be available publicly. So that's cool. Whether Mental Health America, wants to take it on nationally, that'd be amazing to have a good conversation that's been hopefully well edited and, nicely done that way. Great. And have several of those. Wonderful. The other person who was in touch with me recently was somebody who works inside of the larger school districts, so like the intermediate union or whatever you call that, like the bigger space. And they have a specific team, which I think is wonderful, that goes out to schools that experience tragedy. So it can be any kind of tragedy. But she was talking to me about what she needed. And we were talking about like what maybe I could do to have a conversation with their group. And she said something interesting, we'll say. She said something interesting, and not that she's ignorant in any way. She's quite awesome. But she said that the teachers really want to know how to really prevent, like how they can actually reach the kid, and really prevent the suicide. And I just went, okay. That's not how it works. Everybody in my group, everybody's, family member who they lost acted a little differently, right? Some people that means every time somebody says I love you, you have to send them to crisis. That means every time someone's acting real happy, like Gracie, she was super manic before she was really happy, but the reason she was happy is because she picked a day. She knew she was going to do it, and I didn't know that. And now every time someone gets really happy, we have to report them. Some people are isolate. Some people go on a vacation. So everybody's different. I can't tell you how to prevent it. And what an interesting thing to say to a bereaved mother. Again,
Right.
Like I told you, I think last time, the amount of people that reach out to me, they're like, oh, my child is really struggling, blah, blah, blah. What do I do? What can I do to prevent what happened to you? What
and
a
you
question
and I
to
both,
ask.
You and I both think you're asking me that. Just stop and think about what you're asking.
They don't. And I want to help them because
do they think we just have hindsight, that we just forgot that day, we didn't do something that day?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible to me. And I mean, and it goes right along with that. I know I told you on the last episode about the one relative who's like, oh, I went through this with both my kids. I'm like, no, you didn't. You're thinking you almost did, but yours lived. Ha, you won. You're weird for thinking that. You're terrible for thinking that. Wow, are you dumb for thinking that? Because you know what, it can still happen to you.
And
I meet people
and you shouldn't have said it out loud. That should have stayed in your head.
I'd rather they said it out loud because then I know who not to talk to anymore.
That's true.
I honestly, I at the moment I have this weak paranoia that there's a family member mole who's probably sending all my Facebook posts to the people that are estranged.
Oh, there probably is. Yeah,
absolutely.
I about yeah.
And then I'm like, I don't care because I speak the truth. And if somebody wants to come at me and be like, you said this, I'd be like, oh yeah, I did, huh? I think you were talking about me. Yeah, I probably was, huh? What do you got?
But I was respectful enough not to use your name. So good you for reading between the lines.
Nice job. There's a strange law.
You recognized yourself. That's great.
Exactly. There's a rule in writing, and it's called, I can't remember who invented it. It is somebody, I can't remember who it was, but it's called the small penis rule, which is if you give a character who's acting a certain way a small penis, that means that the person who you're actually writing about can't claim it because then they'll be admitting that they have a small penis. Now, frankly, I don't really care about penis size, so I don't care. But the idea is,
I was going to say, there's a faction of us that doesn't matter. It
doesn't matter.
But half of the world.
And, and I don't really write about people three-dimensionally. I don't put I wouldn't put you in a character. I would put, something that happened to you, I might be like, ooh, I'm going to use that thing because it's so interesting. My friend David got a bot fly once. And to this day, the kids that write to me about this one book, because it's a book for younger kids, but there's obsessed with bot flies, and they're like, where'd you get the bot fly idea? I'm like, oh, my friend had one and he described it and it was crawling out of his skin. I'm like, ew. But you use little things. But anyway, yeah, so it was interesting how she was, she really wanted to talk about that, and I immediately corrected her or explained to her that, listen, this is the reality. And then she said it would be really helpful for them to hear that too. And I'm like, yes, it would. And so, it's lovely because that's why she was right on board. She was skating right alongside me. So it's sort of, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. And I mean, this is, again, we go back to, this is why I write books. I write books that are, there are people in the world. I write young adult books, right? I also write middle grade books, but mostly my main space is young adult books. That's really 14 and up. They're really for adults too. And specifically my books too. I write very complex books. And so sometimes people in YA world are like, you don't write books for teens. You write books about teens for adults. And I'm like, both, because actually I think teens are closer.
Well, that's also some people assuming that teens are too dense to not get it, or too.
Exactly.
Yes. I was like, seriously?
Exactly. And so the minute someone says that to me, I'm like, underestimate teens all the time. Much do you in your head? And so it's that thing. But for me, I always wanted adults and teenagers to have a conversation. And what happens is, I'm writing a speech right now to go and collect the Prince Award next week, which I'm really excited about. It's the last time I won the Prince Award. First of all, I'm the first to win it twice, which is nuts. But the first time it was. Thank you. Last time it was pandemic, so I couldn't go pick it up. They sent it to me in a box, and I made a speech.
Now you got to go pick it up.
I get to actually go and have champagne, which is nice. But I'm writing this speech, and it's exactly about that, the underestimation and just how we constantly underestimate teenagers. And that's one of the things about when we think about teenagers or young people, we'll say, people under 25 dying by suicide. It's always like, well, I guess they just didn't know, or they just didn't. I'm like, no, look, my kid was 16, knew exactly what she was doing. She's smart. And was it a good decision? No, it was a terrible decision. Was it impulsive? Maybe a little bit. I'm not sure. You know what I mean? I can't talk to her now, so I don't know. But
was it in a completely lucid or sane or whatever word you want to put on it mind at that moment? Probably not, but that's, yeah.
But at the same time, I also know how, like, I know the details of how she died. And I was told it was one of the most peaceful scenes anybody ever saw. And she could have gotten up at any time she wanted to, and she did not. And so it's, for whatever reason, I have to make my peace with that. I'm a mother. That's my daughter. It's horrible. But you know what? I am not the only one. There are millions of us trying to make peace with those things. And the idea that we are somehow smaller or should be quieter or should know our place, or we shouldn't talk about this death because that death is some sort of shame. My number one thing with kids and what I do in the world, and honestly adults too, is I'm here to eradicate shame. I'm here to eradicate shame. I am done with shame. It took me till I was 48 years old to realize that my childhood abuser, I thought up till then, I was like, oh man, they have something on me. No, they don't. I got something on them. There's a real big difference. Okay. And when we stand out here and we talk about people who abuse children, you're like, oh, it's never the child that we, feel is villainous. And yet, as someone who has survived it, that's what's in your head, because that's what they do to your head, right? So it's so interesting. But, the idea that anyone would judge anyone else for a family member who died by suicide is, to me, the longer I'm on this journey, is there's a grace that we grow as bereaved people, isn't there? There's a grace and a mercy for ourselves and for other people. It's a real Southern, bless your heart. It's a real, I don't know how to explain it, but it gives me fuel. And so that's what I wish for other bereaved people. You know what I mean? I wish for bereaved people that they can get that strength from themselves in finally realizing, look, it's not me, it's the outside world. The outside world's the problem. And then we go to the teen mental health crisis. It's not them, it's the outside world that's the problem. It's the starting school at 7:00 problem. It's the having to do your homework because that's all anybody cares about right now, even though you're having a mental health crisis. It's all of these ridiculous, cold, pointless, standardized test type arbitrary rules that people put on us, not just as teenagers, but as human beings, and now as bereaved people. You shouldn't really talk about that because, your daughter died by suicide. Well, why shouldn't I talk about it? Well, you can't really talk about loss, because why? Well, because she took her life, she did that. I'm like, yeah, that still has nothing to do with how much pain I'm in, how much I've learned, and how much you look like an idiot right now. You know what I mean? Like, you don't understand. And so I think the more we talk, the more people will learn. And I think the more that's the hope. So this is why I write what I write. It's why I do what I do. It's why, this new book is fun as well.
Talk about a couple of the new book that's coming out. And cool. I will, of course, link your website so people can see all their books. Awesome. But if there's anything that you could point any of the bereaved people, especially that are listening of suicide loss, towards in your that would speak to youth, or anything that they would talk about that, talk about what book you think they should get.
Well, I think when it comes to books, unlimited access, you know what I mean? Like, if you set your kid free in the library, that's the number one thing, right? But when it comes to me, my books, I don't know, I don't have anything specific when it comes to that. I have written about suicide several times and long before Gracie died. So I had no idea that was going to happen. But my new book is called Pick the Lock. That's more about toxic family and domestic violence. And it's something I write about a lot, and sort of how the kids are operating inside of it. And even really having kind of a homicidal, almost a homicidal dad, which is, actually more common than we'd like to all believe. That's another one that we all should be ashamed of. Oh man, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you should be ashamed. Really? I didn't do anything. Right. All I did was love a person. But so that's Pick the Lock. That comes out in September. The one I would absolutely say Pick the Lock. I just got a start review for it today from Booklist, and I'm really excited. But I'm re-releasing a book called I Crawl Through It in October. I Crawl Through It is, well, listen to that title, right? I think that book, there's something about that book. It's different. It's part of what I'm doing in my dissertation, trying to pick apart what I did there. It's a surrealist book. And I think that people who've been through trauma have a surrealist lens on their life. And it's hard to embrace, because the world then calls us weird, and weird is weird, right? You don't want to be too weird because you're not going to fit into whatever groups you're in. And well, as a brave parent, you already are there. So welcome to the weird club. And so I think you'd enjoy I Crawl Through It just because it's weird. There's something about that. I always said there's an emotional currency in weirdness.
And you wrote it prior to losing Gracie originally, but now you're re-release. Did you do anything different, or you're just re-releasing it, giving it a new shove?
This one I'm just re-releasing. There's another re-release that I'm changing a little bit because I have to, because times change and I want to. But this one is pretty much exactly the same, and it's got a lot in it. But there's something about this book that makes every single person that's read it sob by the end for no specific reason. There is loss in it, but not by suicide. But it's really about standardized testing and intruder drills. It was before that there were no studies done at the time about the mental health consequences of intruder drills. So I took a wild stab at it. And in fact, I was right. Like every single American teenager right now is experiencing trauma, whether they tell you or not. It is how it's working. And they have to live through stuff that we never had to. Anyway, I Crawl Through It. That comes out again in October. The Prince winning one comes out in paperback in just a month. It's called The Collectors. It's got 10 stories that are pretty cool.
I'm gonna say I've got in my cart right now, after the last few days of doing some different other reading and catching up on what you've been doing. I put The Collectors, so it's good to hear you say that, in my cart. I put Pick the Lock on pre-order, and I Crawl Through It. Those are the three that I currently, I already am sitting here with. I've had Switch for a while, and I know that I have several listeners that one is in high school, meaning she teaches in the high school realm in Canada, but she's a diehard fan of yours, and so and teenagers. She's a good
connect. If you're hearing me now, connect with me. We should just connect and zoom me into your classroom.
She's an amazing. Well, she's in the support space. She's not a teacher, but
that's cool.
She's an amazing human being, and lost an amazing daughter to suicide. And she had said to me, "I really would love if you had ASK," and she no sooner said it. Then it came to fruition. Like, it literally, either she said it the day before our email or the day after. It was one or the other. And I had to laugh and reach out to her and say, guess what?
Well, that's
awesome. Way of speaking my topics into coming. Like, I've literally joked and said, guess what? I'm going to start just putting you on the payroll for topics and conversations. Cause she always not always, but she's influenced a lot of different topics and things.
That's our roots. That's the tree roots. And see, that's what I'm starting to see. Like, again, it's with age, right? I'm going, hold on a second. Humans do have tree roots. And this is where our it takes a village. This is where it takes the other. I do not believe in coincidence. I believe we are all a universe. I do believe that we are far more powerful than we ever imagined. That's why meditation and that Eastern philosophy really is spot on. And I don't know. I don't
believe in any accidents with this connection with people, and especially in my post-loss journey. Every single human that comes across my path, there's a purpose for it. And it's intentional, and it's meant to be a part of some bigger thing that we can't always see all of it right now. But I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, there are people in my community at large that I will continue to be in touch with, intertwined with, and together. I mean, I believe mothers change the world. Unfortunately,
100%.
Some of the mothers that change the world the most are the mothers that have been through the most tragedy. That goes back to our capacity that's changed, and not only for joy, but for love and for understanding and all the things we wish we could take back just to have our kid back, but we can't. It was part of our journey. It was part of their journey. It's all part of it. And that's a whole nother discussion, but I will link all of the things. I couldn't be more thankful for this conversation. We joked beforehand, but it's really not a joke. That we will do this, I think, annually at least, or annually-ish. I live in the ish world. We're not going to mark our calendar a year from now, but we'll do it. One of us will reach out the day before the other one was about to reach out.
And it's perfect. I mean, to always, and just to end on the thing that you always ask, which I think is one of the most beautiful things to ask, is, to go back to what we can do, all of us, everybody listening, what can we do, right? Like, okay, I'm so lucky. I have a platform. I can write books. I can release books. I can speak on podium. And when I get behind that podium, you better believe I speak for all of us. And I tell that story about that woman telling me what she said so that I can hopefully slap some sense into people who are calling me a snowflake for wanting safe spaces for queer kids or whatever it is, like it's ridiculous. But the bottom line is that every single one of us has a voice. This is my number one thing that I tell every kid that I see. I don't care if they're in third 3rd grade, 1st grade, or 12th grade, or in college. They all have a voice. And even just talking to your neighbor matters. Even just talking to your neighbor matters. And then on the flip side, I will actually repeat something. I didn't even expect to say this, but I'm going to say it. Melissa, you said it earlier. There are people who you shouldn't have in your life who aren't respecting you. Walk away from them. Do me that favor. In my post-bereavement journey, that has been the most beautiful and powerful thing about my life, is that I can walk away from people who were mistreating me beforehand or who are not respectful of me afterward. If it's something that if it's someone that you dread seeing, stop.
For God's sakes, give yourself the peace of mind.
Absolutely. Blood is thicker than water is not true. It's not true. My found family, now I understand it. And no, I know it's different. I get it. I was brought up that way too. All I ever did was try and get my 2 sisters to talk to each other. I loved them so much, but it's just, no, it just doesn't work that way. And, I still have plenty of people around me, and it's wonderful, but you are worth so much, and you've got work to do. And even if it just means talking to your neighbor, that's your work. But work on yourself. Make sure you're okay. And go out there and just no shame. You have no shame. Just no shame. I'm done with shame. Melissa, shame is, what did I say? It's the innards of every bully. It's the stopper of progress.
Yeah.
So let's not do that anymore. Let's go out there powerful.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Excellent to see you.
Yeah, you too,
Talk
man.
soon.
We will talk soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Grievers, it is my hope that from today you will take that which serves you and simply leave the rest. I would love to connect with you, and the best way to do that is to start out on my website, where the first thing you'll find is a video recorded message from me. And then from there, you can find everything I offer: the online Zoom support groups, the books I've written, ways to connect for the podcast, and an entire resource library assembled to help all suicide loss grievers find the resources that they need to help them along their healing journey. Please go to theleftoverpieces.com. From there, I hope that we can connect, and I hope that you too can discover that we truly are better together. If anything that you've heard in today's episode resonates with you, I would ask that you please subscribe to get notified every week of my new episodes. And then take a moment to rate and review me on Apple Podcasts so that more grievers like us can find this podcast and this community. It is from my own experience of finding myself sitting amid the leftover pieces of my own shattered heart that I can tell you that while it seems impossible in the early days, it is possible to put those pieces back together and be okay again. And every week, we'll be right here providing more comfort, hope, and community. So until next week, I'll sign off today with some words from one of my Alex's favorites, Peter Pan. Never say goodbye, because goodbye means going away, and going away means forgetting. Grievers, no one here's forgetting. Talk soon.